All right. Hello, I'm Roy Harmon, and this is the Hot Pursuit podcast. Today I'm joined by Jennifer Sutton, who worked in traditional marketing agencies for 2 decades before she decided that there had to be a better way for agencies to serve the business community and uh, really just she kind of developed her own model that we're here to talk about today. So thank you for joining us, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me, Roy. I'm excited to be on the hot pursuit.
Yeah, we're in hot pursuit of marketing insights.
I love it. Love it.
So you started your agency with the idea that you were going to be an unagency. Could you
hmm
tell us a little bit about your background and how it led you to develop that model and what that
Yeah.
model is?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, like you said, I grew up in the agency business, right? I actually went to school for media planning and buying and research design. So I was the data nerd, the science side of marketing. And kind of worked my way up through the agency, hierarchy from running media departments to then being the account planner in an agency, and then really running client service. More of the forward-facing departments like public relations, media, research, digital strategy, the account team, anybody that was like the departments that were the thought leaders and kind of strategists for clients in a full service agency. Um, and I'm going to date myself, where hitting the 2008 kind of recession really hit the marketing industry. We had clients that literally their entire marketing departments were eliminated. Um, 10, 15, 20, 20 people departments at different, brands were just gone. The agencies as an industry, I think 40% closed their doors between 2008 and 2010. The agencies that survived really severely cut back in their staff. And so as we saw the agencies kind of, as companies in the recession, the market started to rebound, a lot of our clients coming back into the fold, they were putting a lot more pressure on the agencies to go, okay, well, I used to have $10 million, but now I don't have, and that's just for advertising. Now, as CMOs or VPs of marketing, they're like, now I only have 5 million, but now I'm responsible for not just the ad campaign, but I'm responsible for all the trade shows, or now I'm responsible for all of digital and IT. I'm now responsible for the CRM and sales teams are now reporting up to me. So I'm no longer just director of marketing or I'm now VP of marketing and sales. And so we started seeing that shift. But it was, again, that pressure of tell me how I need to spend my dollars. How do I need to use it's not just an ad campaign. What's going to move the needle to make my either shareholders, my board of advisors, or my CEO happy? And and a lot of that comes down to three things to make a CEO happy or a shareholder. It is more sales, aka more revenue,
Mm-hmm.
better margins, so better profitability, or increase of I call share of wallet. Of okay, we don't need more customers, we just need our customers to spend more dollars with us. That's usually the three things that a CEO is wanting out of marketing and sales. And uh, and a lot of traditional agencies weren't really set up to think that way. A lot of, because it's either departments in an agency are set up as profit centers, which then they're competing internally for those client dollars. And so a lot of agencies are set up of there's no neutrality of this is the best solution for this client, and it might drive down the profitability of that agency.
Mm-hmm.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense? And so I started I just started to see the model wasn't really working well. The traditional model wasn't working in the best interest of a client or a brand because of those profit centers, but also the way that marketing was what needed to happen is to break out of the silos. You really need to have the digital team being in sync with what the PR team's doing, and in sync what the paid media team is doing, and in sync of what the events team is doing. And traditional agencies are typically not set up that way. Content is too much in silos. Much like, large companies, you get, a PR team is sitting over in a different, floor sometimes than even like the digital team, in-house agencies. But yeah, so I started the company in 2013 with that mindset of one, we don't, we can be an unagency from that model of we're not strapped by who's under our roof to provide solutions for a client, which is what happens in a lot of traditional agencies of, well, we're only as good as our head of digital.
Mm-hmm.
We're only as good as the head of our PR. And so if they are, experts or really driving the latest trends, you're as good as that weak link.
Right.
And when I started to look at, man, there are so many great people in all these different marketing disciplines. What if we just released the roof and really started approaching and building kind of our network of specialists um, based on who's really the best and brightest in digital and PR and media, and driving our model that way. The other thing that we recognized as we started, because there's a lot of agencies that are set up that way of just a bunch of what I call freelancers or contractors. What makes us different is a lot of brands don't like that of not having who's going to be the brand police. How are we going to ensure that whoever touches our, is our brand and our information, is it protected? Who's taking on the risk as the agency, bringing all these different people in? And so Bright, the model is what I call the unagency is we developed all the infrastructure of what a traditional agency provides, as in the operations, the insurance, the all the systems and processes to police and integrate a brand and to protect a brand
Mm-hmm.
of our clients' brands are all under kind of the Bright model. And then we are very careful and intentional of who works on the businesses and how do we police that, because it's at the end of the day, it's all about our client of how are we driving their business forward, how are we protecting their brands, how are we integrating the assets so that every dollar that they're spending is moving forward.
How did you go about implementing that? It sounds complicated. I would imagine it was. What were some of the challenges that you ran into as you developed this approach and put it into practice?
We've seen that a little bit of evolution. When I first kind of launched it, it was more of like building the network of people, right? And matching up people's strengths and passion with client work. And And that was the easy part, right? Finding people that are super passionate about different specialties of marketing. And marketing is, people think of it as a very broad term, um, even though there are thousands of specialists, and we're getting even more fragmented as marketing evolves. Of before, there was like, I want somebody that can be a digital expert, and it's like, well, what do you mean by digital? Because is it because you got web developers and UX designers who really are not SEO or content right, you know what I mean? Or they're not CRM and email specialists. So digital is a now a broad term. But we get very passionate people in these different specialties, but how do we make sure that they are talking to the rest of the team? So really just, a lot of that was collaboration processes and systems, using what we know in large brands, and using things like creative briefs and project briefs and brand briefs, really the discipline of bringing all that thinking and strategy under kind of one synopsis. What the challenge was on the client side was to convince brands of our stability. Unagency at the time, from like 2013 up until pretty much COVID, freelancer, independent contractor is a seen as a negative. Um, Still is, for a lot of larger companies um, that we target and that we work with. So we had to put a lot of other parameters, like we have to put extra insurance. We had to our employee agreements and our contractor agreements are way more legal than, I would say, legalese, or they're not one pagers or two pagers like we would see in other agencies or businesses. Ours are like 10-page documents, because anybody that kind of works in our structure, again, it's all about, we've got to make sure that our clients are feel protected, to work with us, no different than if somebody was an employee. So some of that, and we've evolved there. We learned that there are certain positions within an agency that just can't be performed by an independent contractor. That we needed to provide more structure and oversight to deliver on our client needs. So a lot of our, I will say, project managers, client service, like our really forward facing uh, roles, needed to be actual employees and not contractors.
It sounds like the way that you've got it now is it's being quarterbacked internally, and there's that stability in terms of who the client's going to be talking with, because those are in-house roles. But then you have the flexibility to bring in the best people from wherever they are and put them in the right slot to get the job done.
That's right. And so, yeah, it's more of a hybrid, employee mix of 1099s to W-2s. And then also just, along with kind of those operations and systems, we invest in a lot of tools that, like, there are agencies that are, again, that kind of look like our model. So but they're not really, because they don't own the information of the client, because we've invested in tools like PR tools such as, Cision. We actually Cision and Meltwater are the two biggest. We've used both of them in the past, but we've invested in these tools and research tools. Um, such as like SurveyMonkey in the Pro, the Premium. We have another proprietary one that we own called Serviture. Um, but for example, there's other agencies that kind of have similar models, but if you're a PR person that's an independent contractor working, you have to get your own um, seat and or your own license or your own tool. The agency doesn't own that, and so we made decisions of, you know what, we need to be able to pull those reports, own that history, own that data. So no matter who we bring in under those disciplines, under those special BRIGHT+CO will always have that protected data, and not reliant on our independent contractors to own that. Um, own those lists or what have you. So that does make us different, and why we are priced as a value to a large, I would say, traditional agency, but we're more expensive than like a smaller boutique shop down, that's managing probably more local kind of restaurant or like dental brands, and why we really look at, larger, I would call scale up companies, where because we offer a lot of experience thinking, um, and we have tools and technology that are not typically found at a small agency.
So the strategy in terms of the people who are understanding and developing the strategy, that's in-house. The
That's core team.
tools,
Yep.
that's in-house. And then it's finding those people who are just really great at those. You talked about how digital is just there's so
That's
many
right.
different pieces of it. You're able to, instead of saying, okay, this person's a social media manager, but we need them to put together, a campaign for a display ad campaign on Google Ad Network or something, or Google Display Network,
Right.
you're able to find the best person for each project.
Correct. So we have so in our core team, we have a content strategist that plays oversight on, here's the content that we've mapped out for our client. This is where it needs to happen in social media. And we've got social media specialists that then executes that content strategy on those channels. We've got community builders that come in, side by side, the platform, social platform people, and just help our team build communities. Because it takes a different passion and mindset that of how do you expand those followerships within social media. Then we've got, content writers, that are SEO specialists, and then we've got people that are search management and the coder, the metadata, all that stuff from a back end that works a part of our digital team. We've got a digital strategist that helps us with our website management and website, that manages the UX designers and the developers and the coders. Um, so, like I said, all that is kind of that core team, and then we can bring in, I call it bench players of developers or coders to execute, um, and that's how we're set up.
One thing I'd like to circle back to that I think is, I would imagine how it's beneficial to everybody, is this idea of breaking silos, integrating all the teams, and how have you done that? What's been your approach there?
So that's kind of where I became kind of that specialist in my agency. In the Before I started my own company, I was that account planner, the dot connector, the integrator that really just looked at the full plan and just asked questions like, okay, director of media, you've created, this is a fantastic media plan. Our KPI is about generating leads. So where are they going to go? What's the URL that we're going to direct people to? And it's like, oh, the paid media person's like, I never thought about that. And it's like, well, digital, where are they going to go? What forms are they going to fill out? How are we going to track that? How are we going to, so it's just, became, back in my, I would say in the larger agency days, it was just asking questions of, if our job is generating more leads, or if it's an e-commerce, they want to see the cash register, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. How are we driving that return on ad spend? What are we going to do for the entire journey? And that's just being nerding out on the customer journey, the user experience. What is our expectation around publicity and PR, and also managing client expectations of, you should have expectations around PR. They are going to be completely different than if we're doing a paid media campaign in search, right? I mean,
Right.
the KPIs are not the same. They should not be the same. So it's also kind of educating clients of how are we going to take people through this journey? How are we going to track and measure and put realistic KPIs on each one of these? And then just walking through that user experience. That didn't change when I started the agency. It was really about building more of those models from the start, and then training our team on, okay, we're launching a campaign. What is the KPI? I mean, just to give you an example, we just had this conversation with a client who, they're a scale up client. They have, we're kind of their fractional CMO marketing team. We've developed a content plan. We're getting ready to launch a new website, but they've kind of held sales at arms, like sales and marketing, they're not the same. It's like, well, they need to be aligned, you know, um, and their sales team in the forms added a bunch of fields, and it's creating friction
Mm-hmm.
as far as the return of the results. So we just had a conversation with their I call it their chief operations officer, and said, look, our paid media campaign should be driving 100 form fields based on industry benchmarks, and we're getting like 15. And what we're finding is people are abandoning the form because we aren't making it simple. So that either needs to be a business decision that we're using these forms to help qualify. So when the salespeople get that information, we weeded out the junk. Or are we not giving enough leads to fill the pipeline of the sales team to try to close the sale in the conversation? You know what I mean? It's like, it's either got to be I don't want the paid media, if our KPI is all about generating leads and form fills, we're not meeting our projections. But
Right.
operationally, you guys might be making that decision by adding 10 additional fields. And as we started walking through it, the COO was like, these are questions we can ask on the phone. We don't need to, because you're having 90% of abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing of like when you look at, a cart abandonment, if somebody is trying to, buy a product, right? What friction is it? A 10-step cart process where you're gonna have cart abandonment. So kind of looking at those things that way. But our paid media department was like, well, I'm not sure we are allowed to bring this up because we don't really control the sales process. And I said, but at the end of the day, as an agency, their goal is to increase their monthly recurring revenue by X. we aren't going to help them do that if we don't bring these things up, even if our KPI for the paid media program, is not performing the way that we need it to perform, because operationally they made that decision. The other
Right.
thing is, we, as we're building out the website, it all came up to go, maybe we need to create a different pricing strategy. So we recommended to them, we've got to relook at your entire pricing strategy and how we're serving it up and there's, the psychology of the good, better, best, but how do you price it based on which one you want them to select? There's
Mm-hmm.
some psychology behind that of, um, you know, serving it up. So they didn't want to even have pricing. Well, now we're putting pricing on their website. We're starting to see lifts and leads coming in. But again, that wouldn't have been a discussion if we were just in a silo of either doing their social or just, hey, our lead forms are delivering over to your salespeople. Okay, it's not performing the way, but you guys made a choice to do that. We kind of pushed them outside their comfort zone to go, would you rather have 100 phone calls, or, are you okay with the 15 that you're getting if you're closing them all? And then also going through, like, forcing the operations person to go, well, we're not closing, but 10%. Well, that's a problem. Let's now record these phone calls. And we've got mechanisms in place to be able to record these so that the sales manager can go, what's happening? Why are we not closing? Because their close rate should be more like 50 or 60%.
Right.
So that's, you know, a traditional agency is not going to get probably in that weed. Or if you're just talking to a social media company or a PR company or, a digital company, they're not going to look at it from, here's my business goal, all the way through how are we using all of our assets um, to
Well,
get
so
results.
one thing that stands out to me is that it's a much more proactive approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, is that just a company culture thing, or do you feel like that's part of the benefit of the unagency model? What would you say leads to that sort of really taking the initiative and figuring things out like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's more of a company culture. It is, we have systems in place to review things weekly, both with client but also internally. Um, and we're all kind of asking those questions. So we put, in those internal meetings, the number one thing that we review is, what is that client specific goals? What were the KPIs around each of the different initiatives that we're responsible for? And where are we to those goals, right? So if we didn't have those kind of outlined in place, and it was just like, hey, what's an update, of what's going on? Yeah, it just wouldn't, those questions wouldn't even be asked. But because that is how we drive our internal conversations, that is, like, I think it's our company culture. And then the solutions come from having people that are passionate about and don't just sit there and go, well, it is what it is. It's like, no, I think we can do better.
Mm-hmm.
There's, like, if we're below industry benchmarks, or this doesn't sit right with us, or, man, we work on, it's working for this client over here, just because it's in a different industry doesn't mean that same thinking can't be applied. So it's, we're hyper collaborative in that way, because we're all touching different clients, different accounts. We're seeing what works and what doesn't work. Our independent contractors, they also are working with different clients in different industries and they're bringing that experience So we're collectively getting smarter.
Right. How do you see the model evolving as obviously digital is changing all the time? What sort of changes do you think will be needed?
Um, well, COVID made it easier, I think, um, for clients to feel more comfortable with uh, agencies that weren't in their backyard,
Hmm.
and it's easier to sell because that's what's like at the end of the day. No one's hiring us to be every single person to be full time. I mean, agencies has lived on fractional outsourced marketing since since we began. But for businesses and scale up businesses who don't really understand that model, I think now I don't need to hire somebody in house. I'm comfortable now with having somebody in the next state, or just that trust factor of having somebody performing marketing fractionally um, has been easier.
Hmm.
Uh, but as far as kind of the trend of our model, I think we'll start to see more agencies try to be like our model, um, because a lot of traditional agencies are now no longer requiring people to be in the office. They're now um, letting go of their ceiling.
Hmm.
So I think that, and a lot of them already have kind of that infrastructure and that the systems and processes in place to kind of look and feel like us a little bit more. As far as like the trend in terms of where we are, and I think marketing is getting even more complex than it ever has. Digital is even more complex. Media is even more complex. I don't think that's going to change. I think where agencies like us and like where there's opportunity is can and this is where we kind of hang our hat on of we become kind of the sense makers of we can bring calm to the chaos because we you know there are 150 ad networks. Which one should we go with? Well, we already kind of know that. We've got tools in place that can help um, grade, evaluate, and do some predictive modeling on which assets, which media placements, which media outlets, whether it's traditional or digital, is going to bring in the results that you need. And I think that is where that's where I think the opportunities are for agencies like us, but also from a tools and technology. I think we'll start seeing more and more of the predictive analytics
Hmm.
coming into play.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how that goes for sure.
Yeah. And then, of course, you got AI that's kind of like throwing a wrench in just the conversation around. I mean, most agency from an operations perspective, I'm sure, Roy, you've done just to run the company,
Hmm.
AI makes sense. Um, but we're starting to see clients and brands going, well, I don't need this person or I don't need this human to do content. It's like, yeah, you do. You, you do.
Yeah.
You still need a human eye. Or we've seen some, but it's like, well, I don't need to have you, um, uh, to version out my digital. We'll just get an AI tool to do that. And it's like, but you still need if everybody used AI, it's just templates. Like
Hmm.
every brand is unique. You still need to have you still need the human touch
I
and the brain power. AI is never going to take that.
people people might try that for a little while, but I don't think it'll be long before they realize the limits. It's one of those things that it's a little bit there's just so much going on under the hood that it's easier to think, oh, it's a magical thing that's going to do everything. But like so many things, you realize that it was too good to be true.
Right, right. Or you look at it, go like, I've seen these like AI, we can build your website in like 30 seconds. And they all look the same. They're all very
Hmm.
generic, and it's now I can look at when I'm looking at startup companies, and I'm like, oh goodness, their website was created by an AI, and it almost like I don't know, lessens my. It's not a good brand, right? It's not. It doesn't. It feels very scammy as a company.
I do see it enhancing the unagency model though, because what you need at that point is those quarterbacks, those people who understand what's going on, understand the strategy, who can then go in there and use it to its fullest extent, because it is useful, but it's just not going to take the place of those people who
Correct.
whether they're the contractors or the in-house people. You need the people who have the expertise to really fix
But
it, you
that's
know.
right. I was like, we're not afraid of AI to use it for our operations, right? I mean, we're using it to help with ideation tools, to help, um, with some like social content. But at the same time, it is, but it's that oversight. But it helps us keep it helps us with our profitability in our operations. But we've seen where clients or agencies are just like, yeah, I can do a 90 days worth of content for $150. And it's like, I don't want to compete with that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. If you want to go with that, go right ahead. Because
We'll be here when you realize it
we've
doesn't
tested
work.
it to go. Hey, I'll test that for $150 for our agency and see what. And I'm like, it's crap.
Yeah.
We then you got to have somebody that spends 30, 50 hours cleaning it up to be able to post it. It's like
Mm-hmm.
they would have been better off just starting from scratch.
Right.
Um,
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It's really a lot of great information and a really just a great model that I think is going to just grow as people get more comfortable with the fact that there's no reason that anybody needs to be in the same building or even the same state, and you
that's right.
have such a huge amount of just expertise that you can tap into that way.
That's
Uh,
right.
where can people connect with you and learn more about you and see what you're up to?
So you can connect with BrightCo. It's Bright, BRIGHT CO marketers.com. And then all of our social is, we're on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn under BrightCo Marketers. If you want to reach out to me personally, but either LinkedIn, I'm Jennifer Sutton, or on Twitter, I'm JJ Media Maven. I've had my Twitter since I think I was one of the early adopters, 2006 or seven or something. So, but if you like chatting on media, that's what I use my Twitter for. So
All right.
join the fun.
Well, thank you again, and I hope we can talk again soon.
Hope so too. Thanks, Roy.